Only 9 people were in that dojo the afternoon it happened. 9 people. And for the next 30 years, none of them ever told the full story. Not because they were asked to stay quiet, not because anyone threatened them, but because the moment they tried to describe it, the moment they tried to put into words what a 61-year-old woman did to 3 of Chuck Norris's most decorated black belts in the span of 11 minutes, people stopped believing them. So they stopped telling it. Until now. Rewind. Back to a Tuesday afternoon in October of 1983. A strip of sun cutting through the blinds of a Santa Monica dojo, the smell of canvas and sweat, and a woman standing at the front door with a leather satchel over one shoulder and absolutely no fear in her eyes.
Her name was Keiko Murakami. If you've never heard that name, you're not alone. Keiko moved through the martial arts world the way a current moves through deep water, powerfully, quietly, invisible to anyone not paying close attention. She was born in Kyoto in 1922, started training in classical Japanese jiu-jitsu at the age of 7 under her grandfather, a man who had studied directly under the Meiji-era masters. By 17, she had achieved a black belt in what was then a nearly unheard-of accomplishment for a woman in Japan. By the time the war ended, she had added karate, aikido, and a devastating practical striking system she would later call koryu-te, old hand style, a method she developed herself from first principles over 2 decades. She immigrated to the United States in 1958 at the age of 36, not to teach, not to compete. She came, as she later described it in a private letter to a friend, to see what the Americans have learned and what they have not yet understood. She spent 25 years watching, training privately, teaching a handful of students in a backlot dojo in Torrance, never promoted herself, never entered tournaments, never appeared in the karate magazines that were selling tens of thousands of copies every month with Chuck Norris's face on the cover. And yet, among the small, tight circle of people who had actually seen her move, really move, not at half speed in a demonstration, but working against resistance, her name carried a weight that silenced conversations. One of those people was a man named Ray Castellano. Ray was a 3rd-degree black belt under Chuck Norris's Tang Soo Do system, one of the original members of the school, a man who had trained with Chuck personally since the late 1960s. He was serious, disciplined, not given to exaggeration. He had rolled with fighters who went on to professional careers. He did not impress easily. He had met Keiko once, 3 years earlier, at a small private seminar in Pasadena, one of those informal affairs, folding chairs, no mats, 20 people in street clothes watching her explain a wrist lock sequence. Ray had volunteered to be her uke. He didn't sleep well for a week afterward. He had never felt control like that. Not from a larger person, not from a younger person, not from anyone who hadn't spent their entire life becoming something he couldn't quite name. So when Keiko called Ray in the autumn of 1983 and told him she was coming to Santa Monica, he knew what she was really asking, and he told her yes before she finished the sentence.
Chuck wasn't supposed to be there that afternoon. He was deep in production on Missing in Action, the film that would ultimately change his career trajectory and cement his status as a legitimate action star. He was in and out of the dojo inconsistently those months, checking in, running a session here and there, but largely leaving the day-to-day instruction to his senior students. On that particular Tuesday, the 3 senior students present were Ray Castellano, a man named Dennis Fowler, who held a 4th degree and had placed at multiple national tournaments, and a younger instructor named Marcus Webb, 26 years old, rangy and fast, arguably the most technically gifted student in the school at that moment. The regular afternoon class had wrapped, the students had filtered out, the dojo was quiet, and then the door opened. Keiko Murakami walked in wearing a plain dark blue training gi, the satchel still over her shoulder. She was 5 feet and 2 inches tall. She weighed at the time approximately 114 pounds. Her gray hair was pulled tight against her head. She moved the way very old masters sometimes move, not slowly, but with a total absence of wasted motion, as if every step had been negotiated down to its essential minimum. She set the satchel down by the wall. She looked at the 3 men. She bowed. Ray made the introductions. He explained who she was. Fowler and Webb listened politely. You could see in their body language the thing that always appeared in moments like this. The careful, trained respect layered over a genuine uncertainty. They did not know what to do with a 61-year-old Japanese woman in a dojo built in the image of Chuck Norris's achievements. Then Keiko spoke. Her English was precise, slightly formal, delivered in a low, steady voice. "I would like to work with your best student," she said. "I have come a long way to understand what this school has produced. Your best student and I will learn something together today." A beat. Webb glanced at Fowler. Fowler looked at Ray. Then Keiko added, and this is the line that nobody who was there ever forgot. She added, "Your best student cannot touch me. This is not a challenge. It is simply what is true, but the attempt will be valuable for everyone in this room." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Webb later described that moment this way. "I wasn't offended, which surprised me. I needed to see it. I needed to know if it was true."
They didn't set rules. They didn't need to. This wasn't a match. It was a conversation in the language that all serious martial artists understand. Controlled contact, real intent, no performance. Webb took the floor first. He was 26 years old, 6'1", trained almost daily since the age of 14. His kicking technique was the thing people talked about, sharp, timed with an almost algorithmic precision, the kind of footwork that had scored clean points against competitors 10 years his senior. He stepped in. What happened next took approximately 4 seconds. He threw the jab to test the distance. Keiko didn't step back. She didn't block. She simply adjusted, a fraction of a degree, her shoulder rolling inward, and the punch passed her like wind through a window. Webb felt nothing but air. He threw the cross. She was already not where it was going. He stepped through with a roundhouse. She moved inside it, inside the arc of the kick, where the power isn't, where the leg is still accelerating. She moved there, and her right hand found Webb's lapel, and her hip made contact with his hip, and Webb, who weighed 178 pounds, was on the mat. He was on his back before he understood what had moved. He lay there for a second, staring at the ceiling. Keiko stepped back to the center of the floor. "Again," she said. They went 4 more times. Each time the result was the same, not identical, but equivalent. A different entry, a different finish, the same conclusion. Keiko moved like water finding the lowest point. She was never where the force was. She was always exactly where it wasn't. On the 5th exchange, Webb tried something different. He abandoned the combinations and rushed, closed the distance hard, tried to grab her. She let him get close. She had to. What she did next only worked from close. Her left hand found the inside of his right wrist at the exact moment he reached for her collar. A rotation, a redirect, the kind of movement that looks, from the outside, almost nothing. A slight adjustment, barely visible. And yet somehow Webb's arm was behind his back, his center of gravity was forward, and he was face down on the mat with the careful, firm, total control of someone who had practiced this 10,000 times. He tapped. She released him instantly. Webb stood up slowly. His face was not embarrassed. He looked like a man who has just seen something that rearranges his understanding of what is possible. "I couldn't find her," he said later. "I couldn't find her. She was always right there. I could see her, but when I reached for her, she was already somewhere else. It was like trying to catch smoke." Fowler stepped onto the floor with a different energy. He was 38, stocky, patient. He had more experience than Webb, more patience, less flash. He fought from a lower stance and was hard to knock off his base. He was the kind of fighter who waited, who let you make the first mistake, and then finished cleanly. He watched Keiko carefully before moving. She waited. He waited. The room held its breath. Fowler threw a slow test combination, not meant to score, meant to read. He wanted to see how she responded to pressure rather than speed. She didn't block any of it. She walked through it, not past it, not away from it, through it, like a door opening. By the time the second strike arrived at where she had been, she was already on his outside line, her left hand resting on his shoulder with a contact so light it was almost polite. And then she rotated. Fowler went down hard, not thrown, collapsed, the way a building doesn't fall so much as its structure simply ceases to function. He felt his base go first, then his hips, then everything else. He caught himself with both hands, controlled enough, but the landing was definitive. He stood up. His expression was focused, impressed, a little unsettled. They went 3 more times. The third time, Fowler tried a strategy he'd used successfully against larger, stronger fighters. He committed fully, drove with his legs, tried to overwhelm her guard by eliminating the space where her technique operated. She read it before he committed. How she read it, he could not explain. It was in my weight shift, he said later. Before I even moved, she had already started. She read something in my setup, my hips, my shoulder, I don't know. She was already responding to what I was about to do. The technique she applied that third time was something none of the three men had names for. It was not Tang Soo Do. It was not judo. It was something older and more angular, a lever applied to his elbow at a vector that his body simply had no answer for. He tapped twice before she had finished applying pressure. She released. She stepped back. Good structure, she said to Fowler. Very good structure. But you commit your intention before you commit your body. These things should arrive together. Fowler nodded slowly. He would spend the next 3 years thinking about that sentence.
It was at this point, between Fowler's sessions and what would have been Ray Castellano's turn on the floor, that the front door opened and Chuck Norris walked in. He had come by, as he sometimes did, to run a quick technique review with Marcus Webb before the next day's shoot. He wasn't supposed to see any of this. He stood at the door for a moment, taking in the room. He saw Keiko standing in the center of the floor. He saw Webb sitting against the far wall with the look of a man recalibrating. He saw Fowler, hands on his knees, still processing. He saw Ray standing off to one side with an expression Chuck recognized immediately, the expression of someone watching something historically significant happen in a small room. Chuck Norris had been in martial arts his entire adult life. He had trained with and against some of the finest fighters in the world. He had been challenged, tested, beaten, and had beaten others. He understood, at a physiological level, the difference between technique that worked on cooperative partners and technique that worked on the resistant, the genuinely resistant, the man who does not want to go down. He looked at Keiko. She looked at him. "Sensei Murakami," Ray said carefully. "This is Chuck Norris." "I know who he is," she said. And then to Chuck directly, "Your students are excellent. The young one has extraordinary natural timing. The stocky one has the best foundation I have encountered in an American school." A pause. "They could not touch me." Chuck Norris said nothing for a moment. Then he set his bag down by the wall, and he stepped onto the floor.
They bowed. No words, no setup, no negotiation of rules. They both understood what this was. Chuck moved first. Not fast, not his tournament speed, nothing like it. He moved at something like 70%, a professional's opening probe, the kind of measured engagement that says, "I am taking you seriously from the start." He threw a jab, pulled it short, watched. She didn't move. He threw the cross, longer, honest intention. She moved. It was the same thing she had done against Webb and Fowler, the micro-adjustment, the shoulder rolling, the punch finding empty air. But Chuck's recovery was faster than his students'. He didn't wait for the punch to miss. He was already pulling it and loading the follow. And this is where it changed. Because Keiko was already moving off his recovery. She hadn't waited for the miss either. She had read his weight the same way she'd read Fowler's, in the setup, in the commitment of intention before the commitment of force, and she was already in his blind angle by the time the cross had traveled 8 inches. Chuck felt pressure on his lead arm, a rotation starting at the wrist. He felt his balance shift. He went with it. This is important. A lesser fighter would have resisted and gotten hurt. Chuck Norris didn't resist. He rolled with the technique, absorbed the direction, and came back up in 2 seconds, in a new position, both hands up, already adjusting. The room let out a breath they hadn't known they were holding. They went again. This time, Chuck closed the distance differently. He changed his angle of approach, came at 45 degrees to her center line rather than straight in, a strategic adjustment, trying to take away the outside line she had used on his students. She responded by moving inside. She moved inside Chuck Norris's guard. Webb later described it as the single most remarkable thing he had ever seen in a dojo. She closed herself into his space. Most people fight to keep distance from Chuck. She took it away. She got into the one place where his technique doesn't work at full power, and she worked from there. From inside his guard, she applied something to his right elbow. Nothing visible to the people watching. An angle, a pressure, a vector. Chuck's right arm went offline. He pivoted, tried to reestablish. She moved with his pivot. She was still inside. He felt pressure at his hip, then at his shoulder,
a cascade of small redirections, each one individually manageable, together impossible. He went down to one knee. Not thrown, not swept, taken down through a sequence of small, precise structural removals, like a building whose keystone had been quietly extracted. He was down for 1 second. He came back up immediately. His expression was, by every account, one of total, genuine astonishment. Not embarrassment, not anger, astonishment. The expression of a man confronting something outside the boundaries of his existing map. He looked at Keiko. "One more time," he said. She bowed. They went a third time. Chuck committed fully, not recklessly, but with total professional intent. No holdback, everything engaged. Keiko moved 3 times in 4 seconds. On the third movement, she had him. A wrist, a redirect, his center of gravity rolling forward over a point of contact at his hip that should not have been enough to compromise him, but was, because it arrived at precisely the moment his balance was committed forward. He went down. Flat, clean, controlled descent. He lay there for a moment. Then he laughed. It was a real laugh, surprised, delighted, the laugh of someone who has just received a gift they didn't expect. He got up and he bowed, and the bow was low, lower than the formal minimum. "How long?" he asked her. 54 years, she said. He nodded slowly. "I could feel what you were doing and I still couldn't stop it." "Yes," she said. "This is the point."
They trained together for 2 hours after that. Not sparring, working. Keiko walked Chuck through 3 specific sequences from her Koryute system, things she had never taught outside her own private students. Chuck worked them slowly, methodically, the way he worked all new material, without ego, with total concentration. Webb and Fowler watched every moment of it. Nobody filmed it. In 1983, you didn't walk around with cameras. The footage was never released because the footage was never made. What they had instead was memory. 9 memories, slightly different in their details, but identical in their substance. Ray Castellano told one version of it at a private seminar in 1991, 8 years later. He started the story and got 2 minutes in before the laughter started. Not mockery, but the laughter of disbelief. He stopped telling it after that. Marcus Webb wrote it down in a private journal in 1985. The journal sat in a drawer for 20 years. Chuck Norris never spoke about it publicly. He didn't need to. In the months that followed, those who trained closely with him noticed something shift in his approach to close-range work. A new emphasis on structure over force, a new attention to the microgeometry of weight distribution, an interest in certain classical Japanese concepts that he had not previously emphasized. He never said where it came from. Keiko Murakami returned to Torrance. She continued teaching her small private group until 1997, when she closed her school and returned to Japan at the age of 75. She died in Kyoto in 2003 at the age of 81. She left no written record of the encounter. She left no public statement. She left, as she had arrived, without fanfare, quietly, completely, the way a current moves through deep water.
Here is what that Tuesday afternoon in Santa Monica tells us, if we are willing to listen. Chuck Norris had by 1983 become the most decorated and celebrated figure in American martial arts. He had earned that. Nobody handed it to him. 3 world titles, a body of students and instructors who went on to build their own legacies, a film career that put karate in the mainstream imagination of an entire generation. The achievements were real. And yet, a 61-year-old woman who had never competed, never sought recognition, never appeared on a single magazine cover, a woman who had spent 54 years learning one thing with absolute depth, walked into his dojo and took his best students down and took him down, and did it not through superior strength or superior speed, but through a quality that has no clean English translation. The Japanese have a word, juku. It describes the maturity of mastery, the state in which technique has moved so deeply into the body and the instinct that it no longer requires conscious application. The practitioner does not think and then move. They simply move. The thinking happened 50 years ago. Keiko Murakami was not a better athlete than Chuck Norris. She was not physically superior in any conventional sense. She was simply older in mastery. She had more juku. The gap between them was not a gap of talent or effort. It was a gap of time, of 54 years spent going deeper into a single thing rather than wider across many. Chuck understood this immediately. The laugh was recognition. The deep bow was recognition. He had met someone on the other side of a door he had not yet reached. Marcus Webb, in the journal entry from 1985, ended his account of that afternoon with one sentence. He wrote, "She said her best student couldn't touch her. She was right. But what I remember most is that she said it without pride. She said it the way you'd say the sun rises in the east, like it was just a fact about the world." That's the difference between a fighter and a master. Fighters want to be unbeatable. Masters have stopped wanting things. They have simply become what years of honest practice made them. Keiko Murakami wasn't trying to prove anything in that Santa Monica dojo in October of 1983. She came to see what the Americans had learned. She found 3 excellent students and 1 exceptional teacher. And she showed all 4 of them, gently, precisely, without drama, exactly how much road still lay ahead. No one who was in that room ever saw the ceiling of their art the same way again. That's what a real master does. Not break you, enlarge you.